Hello all, sure you here, back again with another video. This time I'll be talking about the summer TV season of 2016. Now for those of you who have not caught my previous TV season review video that I did back in June, I will be talking about the various shows that I watched over the summer. And I will be talking about them in order based on the day of the week they appeared. For instance, if a show were to air on Monday, I would talk about it before talking about a show that aired on Tuesday. So that's how I'll be going about it. And just to get this out of the way now, if you are not caught up on any of the given shows, on one of the given shows that I'm about to talk about here, and you do not want to be spoiled, I would recommend clicking on one of the annotations you're seeing on the screen now to go around said show so that you do not get spoiled. Now, for those of you who either don't care or are caught up, this is exactly the video for you, because there will be spoilers here. I will be covering events from the season previous to the one that just happened, so that we have a backdrop for the basis for the discussions, which will be the seasons themselves. Now, the first show for this video that I will be talking about is Powers. Now, Powers follows two homicide detectives named Christian Walker and Dina Pilgrim. They are a part of a branch of the LAPD referred to as the Powers Division, meant to investigate crimes in regards to superpowered people in a world that focuses heavily on paparazzi surrounding these heroes, a lot of whom are not actually all that heroic. This series heavily focuses on the grays of various characters, not too many heroes, not too many villains, just people trying to get by, and yeah, it really focuses on the grays of given situations. For good and for bad. Now, the first season kind of focuses on setting up, well, I guess it heavily focuses on setting up the setting and the main character, Christian Walker, who is the main character of the show. He's also a former power. He used to have superpowers and had them taken away. I'm not going to get too into that here. That's all details in season 1. Point being, he doesn't have them. And basically, season 1 just sets all that up. And yeah, it basically establishes him and the powers and non-powered people around him, establishes the setting. Not a whole lot there, not a whole lot to grab me. In fact, when season 2 came around, I actually forgot. I actually didn't notice that season 2 had started. I'd forgotten about the show completely. Because honestly, I just hadn't gravitated toward any of the characters, really. Because, as I mentioned before, the series focuses a lot on grays. There are a lot of gray characters in here. There aren't too many goods and there aren't too many bads. Which works to some extent. But again, if you can't gravitate toward or connect with any of the characters because none of them are actually all that likable, there's not much to hold interest. All right, which is why I was so forgetful of season 2 when it came around. I think we were into episode 3 by the time I had actually started watching season 2 again. Now, season 2... oddly enough, one of the central plot points of season 2 is fixing that. You know, in lore, you have the next generation of heroes who came to the same realization that I just talked about, how a lot of the heroes aren't really all that heroic, so they need to step up and fill in, especially considering one of the few good powers that was in the world was killed at the end of Season 1, which is another one of the central plot points of Season 2, investigating her murder and figuring out what exactly happened to her. Now, the investigation itself is a little on the convoluted side. It kind of felt like they were making it up as they went along, just to make it seem more complicated than it was. I cared a lot more about the side plot that focused on actually creating likable characters, but again, this was a side plot, so it didn't actually get a lot of attention, which meant it was hard for me to connect to Season 2 in a similar way. Now, in the finale, we got a little bit of what I was looking for, but the team that had gathered together wasn't around for very long, and we didn't get to see them in action for all that much. And then it ended on a twist. Season 2 ended on a twist, I think. I'm not entirely sure what happened at the end of Season 2, and we're never really going to find out, at least not in the TV series, because it was canceled. On a cliffhanger. Yeah, if you've seen my previous TV season review video, you know just how much I hate those. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Now, thankfully, I think, in this case, we have a comic series that, to my knowledge, covers the same story. I don't know how faithful the adaptation was from comic to TV. I do know that the creator of the comic was heavily involved in the TV show. I think he was an executive producer, actually. So, I don't know how accurate the adaptation was. I might get around to the comic, I might not. I don't actually know. Again, I'm currently dealing with Civil War II right now, and then I'll have Rebirth to catch up on. I have to sort through Marvel Now, and the books that I'm behind in again with DC. I still want to get into Valiant and Image as well, so I may not get around to Powers, because again, it wasn't all that interesting. But if it gets to the point where I am caught up on all of the other stuff that I want to do comic-wise, then yeah, I'll probably check out the comics, at least to see if the adaptation is faithful, and if it is, to find out what happened. Because I am at least mildly interested. Moving on to the Saturday TV show that I'll be covering in this video, we have Game of Thrones. Now, Game of Thrones takes place, for those of you who are not aware, Game of Thrones is a series that takes place on the fictional continent of Westeros, which is a fantasy-based setting, a medieval fantasy setting with heavy historical European roots, but again, it is very much a fantasy setting at the same time. It chronicles the violent struggles between noble families vying for control of the Iron Throne, which signifies the rule of the continent, essentially, the Seven Kingdoms in the continent of Westeros. Now, last season, well, I guess I should say Season 5 of Game of Thrones, it's a little hard to remember most of what happened in it, mostly because the finale of Season 5, this is where the spoilers are really going to come into play, was when Jon was killed. Right? It's a little hard to remember anything else in comparison to that, but we do know that the Crown and the Faith over in King's Landing the tensions were rising there. And Tyrion had recently joined up with Daenerys. Now, in Season 6, obviously one of the first things that happens is Jon Snow comes back. We all called this. We all knew this was going to happen. If you didn't know, right? Jon Snow came back from the dead. He was resurrected by the Red One. Let's see, what else? Bran became the new Three-Eyed Raven. He was being trained by the previous Three-Eyed Raven, made a mistake that caused the old Three-Eyed Raven to end up dead, along with a lot of other people. Cersei made some severe power plays, wiped out basically everyone of note in King's Landing, other than herself and her brother, who wasn't in King's Landing at the time, to take the throne for herself. Jon gathered up an army so that he could take back his home of Winterfell with Sansa, and he was crowned King of the North. Now, all of this is accented by the reveal that we got to see through Bran's eyes, confirming what many of us had been suspecting for a long time now, which was Jon's true parentage. That he's not a Stark at all, but that he is in fact secretly a Targaryen. And that his mother was Ned's sister, and his father was the crown prince in the Targaryen line, Rhaegar. And that would also mean he was directly connected to what sparked the major conflict that dethroned the Targaryens and brought the Baratheons and then the Lannisters into power. Now, there's a lot there that I just covered, which, now it's Game of Thrones, so that is typically how that works. But, yeah, there was a lot that happened this season. It was very action-packed. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I am definitely hyped for Season 7. For those of you who saw my Blu-ray collection video that I did, I am currently in the process of collecting the magnet steelbooks for Game of Thrones Blu-rays that have been coming out. Every year they've been releasing 2. Every year in June so far. So the last 2 years they've released 2 Blu-rays in the month of June. So I'm hoping Seasons 5 and 6 get released again in June. Of course, that probably means I'll have to wait 2 years for Seasons 7 and 8 to come out simultaneously, or they'll just release them one at a time. Either way, it's fine with me. But yeah, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about Season 7 and how I think that's going to go. A lot of it, I don't have too much in regards to King's Landing, other than Cersei is going to die. She has a massive line of people that has formed that want to kill her, and they're all gunning for her right now. It's kind of hilarious. She's sitting on the Iron Throne, but she's kind of destroyed everything to get there, and nobody else is really happy with her. So it's not really a question of whether or not she will die next season, so much as who it will be who kills her. Now, we have a pretty good idea of who that will be based on the prophecy that we know happened that foretold her death. And considering what we saw at the end of Season 6, it definitely looks like Jaime's going to be the one to do it. That being said, again, everyone's gunning for her. Everyone is gunning for her. The only real exceptions to that is the King in the North, who isn't even really paying attention to King's Landing, because, here's the kicker, King's Landing has never been less powerful than it is right now. it hasn't really been all that powerful over the course of the series. They haven't been able to do much of anything outside of King's Landing itself. You know, the order it managed to maintain was superficial and didn't last long at all. And that was with House Baratheon. With House Lannister, yeah. First you had Joffrey, which at least, well, no, first you had Joffrey, and then you had Tommen, who was basically Cersei's puppet, who then got taken a hold of by the Faith, who didn't even really care about running the country. They just wanted to solidify their own stake and claim into the city of King's Landing itself. And now Tommen is gone, the Faith is gone, it's all gone. It's just Cersei, and she killed every single person who could have possibly supported her. She has no army, she has nothing, she has no power backing her name at all. In the meantime, we have Daenerys with Tyrion and a fleet of ships heading for King's Landing right now with the support of the Greyjoys. Now, Euron is going to be intercepting them, but honestly, I can't see Euron lasting long against Daenerys. We've seen how the dragons go against ships. It doesn't take long. It doesn't take long. You know, one dragon is going to approach the ship Euron's on, roast him alive, and then Daenerys is going to say, "Join me, leave, or die." And then they're going to join up with her, and she's going to have an even bigger fleet, which will allow her to show up at King's Landing, which is effectively a house of cards at this point, kind of literally. And just before she's able to breach the city and take it over, Jaime's going to kill Cersei, because Cersei is batshit crazy at this point. And yeah, the only real the only real thing that I have the only real wild card for season 7 that I honestly cannot predict is how Daenerys and Jon will interact with each other how will they react to each other's existence. You know, there are so many different variables there that could cause things to go in one direction or another. Daenerys could end up giving Jon the throne because he is the son of the Crown Prince. Or it's possible Jon will never find out he's the son of the Crown Prince, and he will end up bending the knee to Daenerys. It's also possible they could go to war. It's possible they could marry. Who knows? Now, the one thing that I need to talk about in regards to the whole King in the North situation is in regards to Sansa. Now, a lot of people seem to think Sansa is going to betray Jon. I don't see it that way at all. In fact, to me, she appears to be his strongest supporter. And indeed, she's going to be his first line of defense against Peter Baelish, who, we have reason to believe, knows about Jon's parentage. Now, my theory is that he is going to threaten Sansa and tell her, look, I'm going to reveal the secret of Jon's parentage, and it's going to get real messy, real bloody. You need to sign on with me, distance yourself from Jon so that you can get out of this alive. And instead of doing that, she's going to end up marrying Jon to legitimize the Stark blood. You know, put the Stark blood on the throne without jeopardizing Jon. You know, since they're not siblings, it's not, you know, the creepy incest thing that we all make fun of the Lannisters for. So that's my theory on that. I think Baelish is then going to try to make good on a promise he made to Cersei, kill Sansa, and flee. Now, the only question in my mind at that point is whether or not he'll make it to King's Landing, and if he doesn't, whether it will be Jon or Brienne who kill him. It could go either way. I kind of hope it's Brienne, because that would make a lot of sense to me, and I like the way that goes. It would be even better to me if he failed to kill Sansa and ran, and then Brienne killed him. I'd like that even more. You know, maybe Brienne finally succeeding at protecting her liege lord, because she's really had a tough go of it She really has. Every single person she's sworn to service, she ends up getting sent away, and while she's gone, they end up dead. And right now, Bran is away from Sansa. So, yeah. Either things will repeat, or she's finally going to actually manage to do her job well. So again, the only real wild card, the only thing that is hugely speculative in my mind, is the interactions between Jon and Daenerys, because we have no idea. We have no idea how that's going to go. And we have no way of knowing. Because there are so many different variables and so many aspects. Even in my own theory when it comes to Sansa, whether she lives or dies will impact that. And could impact that in multiple ways, depending on how it all plays out. Bottom line, thoroughly enjoyed Season 6. Definitely looking forward to Season 7. The fact that it was delayed a couple months doesn't bother me too much, because it's just 2 months. It just means that Game of Thrones is now covering more of the summer next year, instead of starting in the spring, which is nice, actually, because the spring has TV. I don't have any TV much TV in the summer, but I have a lot of TV during the spring, so having it start in the summer is actually really nice, at least from my perspective. Moving on to the final show. Yeah, it's a short one this time. At least there aren't too many shows to cover, because again, it's the summer season. This was a Sunday show. It's also the reason it's the reason this video is this late in the year, as opposed to back in, like, August, when both of these shows were finally finished. But both the other shows, because this show finished, actually I think it officially wrapped up this past week. But anyway, so Red vs. Blue, for those of you who are not aware, is a machinima series that started off, it's a Halo machinima series that started off as a fan-made project of comedy skits that had, I hesitate to call it lore because some of it got redacted and changed around. Some of it doesn't make sense in context anymore. But a lot of it does, and there were definitely hints of the story there. I'm not entirely sure how much of it was planned from the very beginning. I do know that very early on they mapped out a ton of it, and the big picture was revealed in Season 6. So that a show that started off as a bunch of comedy skits turned into this big dramatic story that has now covered 14 years. Which is crazy if you think about it. You know, and it's not even really a fan-made project anymore. It's been officially bought by Microsoft. Rooster Teeth is now working alongside them. We've had Red vs. Blue themed Halo commercials. I specifically remember the Red vs. Blue trailer for Halo 4. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. But anyway, so last season covered the liberation of the planet Chorus from the former chairman of something to do with Project Freelancer, who had hired mercenaries to try to incite conflict and effectively wipe out... Yeah, they wanted to wipe out life on the planet Chorus, and the heroes, the simulation troopers of Blood Gulch Outpost Number 1 stopped them at the end of Season 14, and Season 13, was it Season 13? Yeah, Season 14 is the one that just ended. Anyway, at the end of Season 13, the simulation troopers beat the mercenaries with the help of the two armies. They got them together, encouraged them to stop fighting, and yeah, they rose up and defeated the mercs. However, at the end of it, it looked like Church had to legitimately, no really, sacrifice himself and die to allow people to survive, for the simulation troopers to live on. We don't really know the details of that. And we still don't, because season 14 was, unfortunately, effectively a season of PSAs. We got some good backstory. There were about 6 good episodes of backstory. 2 little arcs of backstory. We had one that gave us the background on the original simulation troopers. We got background on Church and Tucker. We got background information on Griff and Simmons and Sarge. We even got some background information on Vic, of all people. And there was also a twist at the end of the first background arc that may not actually be a twist. We don't know the details of it. It may not mean anything. So I don't really feel like talking about it because there's not much to talk about because we don't know enough. And then the second one was a lot less necessary. It was a lot less a story that needed to be told, but it was still interesting to see. That's the background on Locust and Felix, the mercenaries that were defeated at the end of the previous season. Now, those were good arcs, and there were some good episodes in between as far as being comedic, but very few. There were a lot of episodes here that were actively painful to watch. A lot of them were disinteresting and not engaging. This season was a slog to get through. This is easily my least favorite season of the show. I've only come close to this disappointed with a season of Red vs. Blue once ever, and that was with season 5. But even season 5 actually had a plot. The only real issue season 5 had was that it was slow every now and then. Dragged on a bit. Whereas season 14 didn't really have a story. So it was not the most enjoyable of seasons to watch. Honestly, if you're one of those people who saw the synopsis of the season and thought you'd wait and see to check it out, honestly, I'd recommend just skipping it. Or if you're curious about the character-driven episodes that give you the background information, I think it was episodes 2 through 4. Yeah, 2 through 4 and 9 through 11 for the 2 different stories that give you background on the characters. Other than that, it's hard for me to recommend this season. It was empty and painful to watch. Now, I'm not saying that I would have liked it if they had come out and said, yeah, this is a season of PSAs. I probably wouldn't have watched it. That being said, I wouldn't have watched this if I'd known what it was. So hopefully season 15 returns to the story of Red vs. Blue. The thing that has had me engaged as much as I have been for the last 14 years. Well, I haven't been watching it for 14 years. I actually started watching the show somewhere during season 6. I can't remember if it was near the beginning or near the end. I think it was close to the middle. Season 6 is, incidentally, my favorite season of the show. It's the season where everything starts to get serious. It's where we finally get actual characterization and character arcs for Church. I mean, we've had character arcs and characterization for the characters prior, But this is when things actually start coming to a head. This is when we realize, oh, they're actually doing something with this. They're not just saying words. And it worked out really well. It was a huge surprise, and it sticks with me to this day. The Meta is my favorite villain the series has had to date. There have been some awesome villains, but the Meta is definitely still my favorite. Not that I want him to come back. His ending was awesome. I do not want... Don't turn Tucker into the Meta. Don't do it. Please. I don't think you will, but... The one thing that I can say that I definitely want from Red vs. Blue that has been admittedly sorely lacking is plot stuff for the Red team. The Blue team has had a ton of stuff. They've had a ton of plot and characterization and character growth dedicated to them. And the Red team have kind of just been this slapstick comedy. And I get it, that's part of the formula, but I kind of like to see some actual characterization and character growth for Griffin Simmons, and maybe even for Sarge. Sarge is actually kind of a tragic figure if you really think about it. Especially when you look at how he got his position at Blood Gulch in episodes, it's either 3 or 4, I think it's 3, of this season. You know, he's actually a pretty tragic, messed up figure. And exploring that would be an interesting thing. So, that concludes my thoughts on the summer TV season for 2016. The Civil War II video that I talked about in my previous comic book update will be coming sometime in November, probably close to the end. The next TV video that I'll be doing, probably the same time as the previous fall video, which will be end of May, beginning of June, somewhere in there, probably. Unless another show in that season ends up taking a little longer, but we'll see. Anyway, that's it from me. Hope you enjoyed. What are your thoughts on any of the shows I've talked about here? What shows did you watch over the summer? I'm actually curious as to what your thoughts are on what you've been watching. What are your thoughts on these shows here? Whatever you think, comment below. It's great to engage with the audience. That's a part of why I do this. So please share your thoughts. And I'm out. See you next time, guys.